name is Rachel Paul, and you're watching Lake Votes 2012. We're here with Congressman Jim Renacci, running for the U.S. House of Representatives. Welcome, Mr. Renacci.
Thank you.
So the Washington Post listed the House of Representatives elections in Ohio as one of the states that could determine whether the Democrats will retake the House or whether the Republicans will hold as majority in 2013. What are your views on this?
Well, again, that's just a political thought by the Washington Post. I mean, I'm not sure whether it's Ohio or whatever. There's a number of seats that are up for election. 435 seats are up for re-election every year. So really, this is just a race between two incumbents. It's a race in regards to differences between two incumbents, and it's really a race where the people of the 16th district, the new 16th district, will have to make a decision about to pass. You know, and it's for me, it's very simple. As an incumbent, I have a voting record, and of course, my opponent has a voting record. Right. And I think people just need to take a look at those voting records and decide which direction they want to take for the future of our country. My opponent, you know, has voted for cap and trade and a number of issues that came up in the last election. She voted for the health care plan. She voted for cap and trade. Those are things that this district did not agree with, and you know, I voted against, or I voted to repeal the president's health care plan since I've been there, and I've only been there 22 months. So there's just a difference in the two candidates, and the people of the 16th district will really have, there's a stark difference, and they'll be able to make a decision about two candidates.
Right. And you briefly touched on this, but this election is odd because both candidates are incumbents, you being from the 16th district and Betty Sutton being from the 13th. How do you think this will affect the outcome?
Well, again, it just comes down to people getting to know the two candidates. This new district is 50% of the district is who I represent currently. 50% is new. For my opponent, I think it's 20% is her old district, 80% is new. So it comes down to the district just really getting to know us and deciding the differences. But as I said earlier, it's a stark difference, and really the voters just need to know the differences in our position. Again, she's voted for all those things that this district did not agree with 2 years ago, and I don't think really agree with even in this current situation.
Right. And kind of switching gears, with over 5,000 farms operating in the 16th district, what are your views on subsidies? And can you briefly explain what subsidies are?
Yeah, well, I will tell you this, that last night I was given an award as friend of the Farm Bureau because of my votes with the farmers in this district. And they understand, look, farming is a small business. And what we have to make sure is that when it comes to subsidies and direct payments, that it's a fair playing field. So I'm really in favor of looking at ways to work with the farmers to make sure that the safety net is there, but that the safety net does not pick winners and losers. So when there are subsidies, there, you know, direct payments, those are things that are paid to the farms. And many farmers want us to look at, you know, some kind of crop insurance. This year, we've had very devastating issues with our farmers with the drought. I think we need to make sure that the decisions we make in Washington really give the farmers a fair playing field and don't pick winners and losers.
Right. And in regards to crop insurance, it's becoming more and more popular, important to a lot of farmers rather than direct payments. So do you think crop insurance is more beneficial?
Well, I think crop insurance in many ways, and again, we need to look at that. We need to work with the farming community, but it gives the opportunity not to pick winners and losers, and that's really the key. When some of these large farms are getting a large portion of the subsidies and some of the smaller farms aren't, we need to make sure that it's a fair and balanced approach for farming, and that they all have the opportunity to be able to work within a fair and reasonable playing field.
Right. A major issue in this election is health care. What is your opinion on the most recent Supreme Court ruling? Well, again, the
Supreme Court decision I respect. I still disagree with the health care plan. I don't think it's working. When 85% of our problems in health care are cost, and today we have a health care plan that was passed, of course, 2 years ago before I got there. And it basically is driving costs up. The president, when he brought the health care plan out, said that we're going to cut costs, but costs are going up. And when I travel the district and I talk to businesses and consumers of health care, they're saying the same thing. Costs, you know, health care is rising. And the problem is because the bill didn't take into effect the main problem, which is costs. There are some coverage issues in there, which I think are good, But we need to have good health care reform, but we need to have health care reform that the people understand and it works for the people and it brings costs down by bringing competition into the marketplace.
Okay. And you briefly touched on this, but what do you think would be a better solution rather than Obamacare?
Well, I think a solution that is driven by the constituents where they have an opportunity to have, for instance, buying health care across state lines. Today we can't do that. I think we need to look at tort reform. I think we need to look at competition. We need to make sure that there's competition in the marketplace because competition will drive costs down. Today, the current health care plan, one thing for certain, and this really affects our seniors, is the Obama health care plan. It takes $718 billion out of Medicare and puts it into Obamacare to help pay for Obamacare. That's the one thing for certain it does. The other thing that for certain it does is it sets up a group of non-elected officials who will make health care decisions. These are things that I don't think the American people want. This district clearly indicates when I travel the district that that's not what they want. They want a system where they can work with their doctors, they can get answers, they can work straight, be able to have a doctor-patient relationship, not affected by government health care.
Right. So what are your plans to help reduce the unemployment?
Well, that's easy. As a small business owner for the last 28 years, I've created over 1,500 jobs, employed over 3,000 people. One thing for certain is we need certainty and predictability. Washington does not bring certainty and predictability to the marketplace. Washington causes uncertainty, and it causes unpredictability. We have a health care plan where nobody knows what its costs are going to be. We have, regulations, new regulations growing every day, extreme, these regulations that reach out and cause businesses to say, wait a minute, I'm not going to do anything. We have tax rates that may go up if we don't do anything on January 1st. These are all the uncertainties that small business owners who employ people are saying, wait a minute, I'm not going to do anything. We need to take that and change it so that we bring certainty and predictability to the playing field so that small business owners understand that I know what my tax rates are. I know what our overhead and burden regulations are. It's interesting. We passed a bill out of the House of Representatives just a few weeks ago that said no more regulations until unemployment gets below 6%. That's a pretty reasonable bill if you think about it. It hasn't been taken up by the Senate yet, and that's one of the problems. But these are things we need to do to bring certainty and predictability back.
Right. So what bills and issues have you voted in favor for that directly affect our local area?
Hundreds of them. I mean, if you look at all the bills we've passed, I voted to balance the budget. I voted for 2 budgets since we've been there. I mean, one of the main goals of the House and the Senate is to pass a budget. The House has now passed a budget the last 2 years. The Senate hasn't taken up a budget in over 3 years. I just told you about the one bill that that says no more regulations until unemployment goes below 6%. We've passed legislation to increase the opportunity for drilling in the Gulf of Mexico, which will affect this area by bringing greater supplies of oil and gas to the region, which will eventually supply and demand. You learned that in school. The more supply you have, the ability for costs to come down. So all of these bills that we've passed will affect this area. But most importantly, there's over 40 jobs bills out there that are just sitting there that the Senate hasn't taken up, which will help the #1 issue here in this area, which is jobs.
And then what are your views on the nation's debt and how to help reduce it?
Well, the problem with national debt is you today have about a $50,000 liability. I have the $50,000 liability. Everybody here that watches this program, the debt is growing so rapidly that somebody's got to pay it off. And we all have to realize that that $50,000 doesn't just go away. We're going to have to pay it off. So someday, and if we continue to spend the way we're spending, that burden just keeps going on and on and on to people like yourself and the next generation coming up. We have to be able to reduce that debt. How do you do that? Well, I was in the business world for 28 years. Quite frankly, you got to quit spending money you don't have. You can't continue to spend like we're spending. You can't continue to just say, well, there's a federal government out there. It'll take care of it. We need to look at programs. We need to decide which programs are working and which aren't. If they're not working, we need to remove them. We need to make decisions as to what's not working. In the business world, you make a decision. And I should always say in the real world, because Washington, D.C. is not the real world. In the real world, you make a decision, and if it's wrong, you admit it's wrong and you change it. In Washington, we make decisions, and then if you voted for it, I always chuckle. If you were one that voted for it, you'll say, well, that was the right decision. You never say it was the wrong decision. truth of it is we make decisions that need to be changed. We need to redirect. Healthcare plan, I hate to go back to that, but that's a decision that's causing our deficit to grow. It's causing unemployment. We're stagnating on the employment area because people don't want to employ anybody because of the certainty and predictability. We need to be able to look back at some of these things and change them.
And what are your views on the cap and trade bill?
Well, I've said this, you know, it's amazing. 2 years ago, my opponent voted for cap and trade, and I've said anybody who voted for cap and trade, especially in Ohio, should never be sent back to Washington. Now, my opponent voted for cap and trade. Let's face it, when 80% of our energy is coal-directed here in Ohio, and you represent Ohio, you want to make sure you're using the most efficient sources of energy. And that doesn't mean, you know, I've always said we should have an all-of-the-above plan. We should be looking at wind and solar and nuclear and all of them. But we shouldn't be taking that away. We shouldn't be taxing the people here in Ohio by putting a cap and trade, passing a cap and trade bill that actually costs us more money. Your electric bills will go up. You know, we're losing power plants because of it. These are things that will affect us. Who pays for it? We all end up paying for it. In Ohio, again, when 80% of our energy is coal-driven, we shouldn't be attacking coal. Now, if you're a representative for California or Arizona, maybe you can look at that because the wind and the solar areas. You know, Nancy Pelosi, she's a big supporter of cap and trade because she's a representative of California. My opponent has voted with Nancy Pelosi 2 years ago. 99% of the time, she voted for cap and trade. This is what I keep telling people. You have to represent the district that you're actually representing.
And actually segueing into that, you kind of mentioned earlier how you travel around the district, but what do you do to stay connected to your constituents?
Well, for me, it's easy. I have Twitter accounts. I have 3 Facebook accounts. One of the Facebook accounts, I communicate directly with constituents in the evenings, but I have a congressional one. I have a campaign one. I've also done numerous town halls. I've probably had over 150 meetings with different local businesses. I've spoken to the chambers. I'm a representative that gets out all the time. Yesterday, I walked into a Home Depot store, for example, and I talked to 30 or 40 of the employees there. I think that's the way you get to understand what the needs of the people are and the people that you represent.
Right. And finally, lately, anytime you turn on the television, there's campaign ads running. So what are your views on the cost of elections today?
Well, elections are very expensive, and it's one of the concerns. I wish they were less expensive, but it's not as much the cost as the message. The problem with what you're seeing is there are a lot of costly ads that have messages that people have to really filter themselves through and make sure they understand it. I mean, I'm being attacked by a lot of campaign ads here recently. I was attacked 2 years ago with the same, but I think people just need to get past the message. And the expense, look, I'd love for these races to be a lot less expensive, and I think we need to look at that someday. But right now, I'm more concerned about the message that's coming out in some of these. I mean, I don't believe in these attack ads. I mean, I've been personally attacked. My family's been personally attacked. I think we really need to be able to discuss what we believe in, what our voting records are, and what our issues are. Put those out for people to make a decision, and then let them decide.
Right. Well, thank you so much for being with us today, Congressman.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
I'm Rachel Paul, and you're watching Lake Television.